Welcome to Strategy Battle Gamers to another GBHL YouTube video. You're here with your host GBHL Damian, and I'm doing a little hobby tip vlog. The reason for this is, or the point of this is, I'm going to show you how I do my bases. So I'm just going to bring him over for a minute. So yes, at the start of December I was at Mansfield with the pre-Battle of Five Armies tournament, and Sam Jeffery very kindly gave me these guys, some Hobbit Sheriffs. He knew I'd been after these for a while, and he very kindly offered me up 4 of them, which is lovely of him because he's a top bloke. And I said, what do you want for them? And he said, I tell you what, just do a video about how you do your bases, because I think he's a bit of a fan of them. So I said, yep, that's an awesome deal. 4 out of production models for a little video. I said, no worries at all, mate. Only downside being, since then I haven't done a single base. That was at the start of December, and we are now essentially 2 months later, or at the start of February, and I haven't finished a single base because I hadn't finished any models. And so yeah, sorry Sam, sorry it's been 2 months in the waiting, but I haven't been fobbing you off, I just haven't had any bases to do. But the good news is, as you have seen if you've been following my hobby vlogs, I have now finished Thror and Balin, and you'll see them in more detail on probably hobby vlog 10, I think. So if you want to have a good look at those models, go and check them out there. But I've now finished them, so I will indeed show you how I do my bases. And this is the finished effect. So I'll hold this up on bulb. Hopefully that's in focus. So we've got these kind of gravel on the bottom, bit of static grass, and I'm going to talk you through how I achieve that. So before I actually get started, I'll just show you what I use. Obviously we have the bases like this, and I don't have anything stuck down on them at the moment. I think I'm against the majority of people, I guess, in this, that I put my grass and everything down after I've painted the model. I know a lot of people do it before they spray it because they think that kind of seals it and makes it more secure, but I've always found that whenever I do that, I then rub it off all around the edges as I'm painting the model. So I always finish the model first and then put the stuff on. So the model's completely painted, and what I'm going to do is use PVA glue. I'll just use this stuff. I think I got it in a like kids art shop ages ago. It's just normal PVA glue, nothing fancy. And I'm going to dip it into this stuff, which is normal sand. I couldn't even tell you where I got this sand anymore, whether it was modelling sand or builder's sand or what, but it's just normal sand. And it has all these tiny little bits in it, these little bits of gravel. So I'm going to show you some of these. And these were from Games Workshop years and years ago. I probably got these about 15 years ago. They don't sell them anymore. But it was a bag of little tiny stones that they used to sell. So I've obviously just, as I said, they're not on sale anymore, but I've just had them for years in this tub. So they haven't been topped up in a while. But when I run out, who knows what I'll do. But it seems that I've still got plenty to go for a while yet. So I've mixed that all in. It's just a mix of sand and gravel. And basically that's what I'm going to dip my models into. Okay, so now I'm going to move the camera so you can actually see me doing it, and we'll get started. Okay, so here we are. I've got some PVA glue on an old palette and a little bit of water to mix it up, and I've got my model here. I'm going to be applying the PVA with a knackered old brush so it doesn't get ruined. I'm also putting the glue on a different palette to the one I normally use for my paint, because I found that sometimes if you put glue on that one, then it can actually become sticky again when you add water to your paint and it gets all messy. So I'm going to grab this and just start dolloping it on all over the top of the base. I'm trying to be careful not to get it on his feet, but I'm applying it fairly liberally, like so. I found in the past that it tends to, it can actually begin to dry out relatively quickly if you don't put an awful lot on. So I tend to put on quite a lot to kind of err on the side of caution. Between his legs. Sometimes trickier on models that have cloaks because it's quite hard to get the brush in, but this one's not too bad. And again, like I said, just touching up around the edge, because it's the edge that you need to make sure it glues to. Make sure there's plenty on there. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is dip them into the basing material and just use a little kiddie spatula to push it all around, and then tip it a bit so it drops between his legs and gets on there. At that point you end up with something like that. I'm then just going to use my finger to wipe it off the edge. Make sure none of it glues around the rim. So you get something a bit like that. And then the last stage, that noise was the wonderful Emma O'Byrne filming. The last stage is just...
Focus.
Oh, sorry, she's trying to focus. You alright? And then the final stage is I'm just going to take my hobby knife and just knock it off anywhere it's actually got on the model. So you'll inevitably get a few bits sticking to his feet and that kind of stuff. And it's easy to remove it now, but it'll be a nightmare to remove it once the glue's dried. I'm just going to nip around there, check none of it's got on his cloak. That all looks to be alright. You can tell that painting this one's going to be a bit of a problem getting underneath that cloak at the back, but we'll deal with that when we come to it. When you make sure his feet are both clear, any rough grains of sand, that is the basing bit done. Sorry. And then we'll leave that, I don't actually know how long it takes to dry, but I tend to leave it for 24 hours just to make sure it's actually solid before we start painting it. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to do barlin in exactly the same way, and then we'll come back. Okay, so here's how they're looking after that stage is complete. That is Thor with all the sand and gravel glued down onto his base. And I've also done Barlin with all the sand and gravel glued down onto his base. That's been left to dry overnight. What I'm now going to do is start painting them. So I paint my bases in just using 3 colours, 3-step process, which I start off by doing this, which is Rhinox hide, which is the equivalent of the old scorched brown. And what I'm going to do is water this down and paint it all over the base. It'll be the base colour and it'll just cover it all. I'm then going to dry brush it with Mornfang brown, which was the old bestial brown, and then finally I'm going to dry brush it with a Shabty bone, which is the old bleach bone. And then once that's done and they're all looking good, I'm going to paint the rim with Mornfang brown again. So those are the next stages, and I will show you how I do that now. Okay, so I've got my Rhinox hide open. I've got a fairly large knackered old brush for this, and I'm just going to grab a load of this, put it on the palette, and add a load of water to it, just to make it nice and runny. And then all I'm going to do is whack it on all over the base and cover the sand and make it nice and dark. This is going to be the base coat for my bases. This is going to be harder to do on models like Thrall. That's why I'm showing you on this one, because Thrall's got the big cloak that comes to the bottom of the base, and it's going to be quite fiddly to get the brush in there.
Can you see that, Damian?
Can you see what?
Can we see his cloak?
Yeah, sorry. So, can you see there? See how close the cloak is to the base?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's going to be quite tricky to stick the brush in there. So that one will just require a bit more time, but I thought for the purposes of the video it's better to show you on Barlin. Is that alright, Emma?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Put a bit more of this in. And inevitably, as I'm doing this, some of the sand and gravel will come off. In some places more than other places, which I'm absolutely fine with. because those places will just be the bits where I add the static grass when I get to that stage.
Hashtag Damian's wearing a t-shirt.
There we go. I think you have to be careful you don't kind of miss any that's sitting between the legs.
I can't see what you're doing because your massive thumb's in the way.
Sorry. And then once it's covered, I'm just going to make sure that the very top of it and the edge of the rim is covered, because you get bits like that. I don't know if you can see. It's got a bit thin. It's in there. And I'm just going to cover that and make sure that goes dark brown. And there he goes.
Nice thumb shot again. Thanks, Damian.
Thanks. There he is. It will be a fairly wet paint, so it will take a while to dry, so I normally leave that. And then, yeah, I will do the next bit. So, at this point, they've been slapped in scorched brown, as we were showing you on our previous instalment. That's both of them. And now I'm going to begin the dry brushing process. So I'm going to do it with Barlin again, because it's a bit easier. So I'm just going to get bestial brown, this old knackered old dry brush. This. I'm going to get bestial brown, knock off most of it on the tissue, and then just kind of go nuts and do this quite heavily, going over his base like this. It was the lovely Emma O'Byrne behind the camera at the moment, who, when I first told her what dry brushing was, said, "Isn't that a god awful waste of paint?" And yeah, I guess in a way it is, because you do end up knocking off most of it onto the tissue. But it's an age-old process passed down from blind Bedouin monks to more gamers everywhere. The term dry brushing first comes from a 17th century monk who was using his brush to mop the floor of the monastery, and traditionally they would use a wet brush to do it so that they'd clean up the floor. But as he was doing it, he used a dry brush, and it ended up leaving a kind of mottled pattern over the top that gave it a kind of colour and gave it some definition that they actually thought looked really good. So
that's not true.
Some of these facts may have been exaggerated, but then, you know, all great stories need a little embellishment. You'll have a tale or two to tell of your own when you do your own dry brushing. And there we go, and it should look something a bit like that. Is that alright? Okay. Let's dry brush with bestial brown. Sorry, this is Morphan brown. It used to be called bestial brown. Okay, so we're now just going to do exactly the same thing. Same brush with a shabty bone. So I'm just going to take a load of this and start dry brushing over the base. And what you suddenly find, I always think, with this stage, is that suddenly the whole thing starts to pop. It makes a very kind of neutral base, I think, to set the model off. It's amazing, I think, the difference that this makes, and suddenly your model will start to look finished. Exactly the same model without any more paint on it will look vastly better as soon as you just kind of covered up all that mess that you made on the base as you were painting them. Let's go over here, and I like to make this, if you go quite light on it, it tends to look a bit kind of washed out and like pale brown, but I tend to try and make it look quite light and quite almost white sometimes. And once this is done, you're then just going to pop, you're going to bring a bit of, don't worry about it looking too light, because you're going to bring it back to life with some static grass. I tend to then, once it's done, I'm always tempted to kind of go over it a few times, particularly on the big rocks, to make sure that those rocks are kind of exposed, because those are the bits I won't cover up with grass, so you want to make sure they look nice and bright, as it were. This is the way I've based all of my Lord of the Rings models for the last 4 years. so I don't base things differently for different collections and different armies and different landscapes. I've always just done them all exactly the same, which has its disadvantages because my lake towners are just on stony bases instead of being on planks, but it does, the advantage is that I can just mix and choose all my models together and they'll always look unified, and that is looking pretty good. Look at that. So before I paint the rim, there is one last stage I need to do, which is, I don't know if you can see this, but when I put the scorched brown over the base, some of the sand will get stuck on the rim, and so I tend to have to go around with my modelling knife and just scrape those little bits of sand off. Make sure the rim's smooth before I paint it.
Why does it need to be smooth?
Because otherwise you'll paint over it and you'll have little bumps, little sandy bumps, which, it's not the end of the world, but it's worth taking a couple of minutes just to clean up and try and remove all those little bits. I think he's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to do the same with Thrall, and you can see that there's a fair few bits there. I'm just going to scrape away like so. Okay, so the final stage that involves any paint on the base is just to paint the rims, obviously. And as I think I said a while back, I use the Mornfoam brown again. I've used all my rims on that. But a very important step before I do that is to do this. Because over the course of doing the base, you will have got loads of sand and dust and little bits of whatever on the base, and when you paint the rims, it tends to get stuck to them. So it's always a good idea to kind of use that incredibly technical process and clean your table. I'm going to dump that on the palette, and again add a whole load of water to it so it's quite watered down, and fairly quickly and easily nip around the base. Like so. Suddenly you get that wonderful feeling that your model is all but finished. This is quite exciting for me because it is the first model I've finished in about 3 months, which is rather wonderful. And I normally just tend to go around twice in one go, 2 thin coats. Something like that. That will be the rim done, and I'll pop him down. And I'll do that for Thrall, and then once that's dry, I'll probably go around it again to give it another coat, and that'll be it finished, and I will come back when that's done. Okay, so there's both Barlin and Thrall, and their rims have been painted. So they've been gone around a few times, and they look pretty good. And so what I'm now going to do is just add some static grass to it. And I'm going to do this on Thrall, I think, because I think I'll be able to show you a bit better. So I don't know if my glamorous assistant can get in here. You can see there's a bare patch there. So you've got the stone stuff here, and then there's a little bare patch here. Yeah. Oh yeah? That's like I said, sometimes when you're painting it, it can be knocked off. But then you can cover up that by putting the grass on there. So knackered old brush again. I'm just going to grab some PVA and put little patches on there. And it's pretty much arbitrary where I put it, but what I tend to do is put it anywhere where I might have got a bit of paint on the foot potentially. If there's any little gaps that have come up around the edges, I'll pop it in there. And I like to do lots of small clumps rather than few big clumps. You can see around here potentially on the edges there's a few little bare patches like that. So I'm going to do that. It's all fairly arbitrary where I put this stuff. Just hope that you get a little bit on most areas of the model. Anywhere where maybe the shabby bone colour has bleached it out a bit too much. And that'll probably be right.
And you're doing big blobs of glue there, or are you doing a light covering?
Yeah, kind of like smallish blobs of glue, your standard size blob of glue. I'm just going to pop them in here. I use this handy spatula. Be sure to ask an adult for help using it if you're under the age of 24. And just going to pop this in around there, scoop it up around the base, and then kind of tap him off.
Oh, there's that blowing again.
That is very important. And then just pushing the static grass up so that it kind of stands up, knocking it off the base. Like so. And that really is it for how I do my bases. I do also then tend to just get a little brush, normal paintbrush, and just go in to where his feet are and just kind of push some of it. If it's ever got on the cloaks or anything, I find a paintbrush is quite a easy way of getting it off. Just check it hasn't kind of clung to the cloak or anything like that. But it's normally pretty good. And that is about it. Make sure there's no little bits that are stuck to the rim in case they've got glue on them. Sometimes you add more by trying to get rid of it. And there we go. That is his base finished.
Ooh.
Thanks. And that, I'm going to obviously do that to Barlin, and then when he's done I will show you the two of them next to each other. And that is that. The bases are finished. So there is Thrall and Barlin, both with their static grass glued down, and both completely finished. And this is a very exciting moment for me, because it is the first time I've finished any models in 3 months. These guys have been on the go for 3 months, which is kind of crazy. But there's my little hobby tip vlog on how I do my bases. Honestly, over the last couple of nights I've utterly lost track of how long this is. My guess would be about 15 minutes or so. I hope you found it useful and given you some sort of insight. So, Sam Jeffery, this is for you. I hope it was worth the wait. Almost certainly not. So yeah, there we go. As always, don't forget to comment, like, share and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. Support your Hobbit hobby, and happy strategy battle gaming.